Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you are watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Well, I know it has been a while since you've been seeing a constant amount of content over here, but believe me, everybody, you all know as the reasons as to why it's been going on my end, but trust me when I keep saying this, guys, it's coming. There is going to be a lot of content. But I'm very excited for tonight because I've got Cammy here with me, and we are finally here with a brand new episode of a show that we both love creating so dearly here on That's Comical, and that, of course, is the DCU animated live show. Cammy, as always, it is so exciting to get into the Zoom room with you and just have a great conversation about some incredible DC animation.
I agree. I love this conversation, and I love the part that leads up to it also because I get to watch cartoons.
and you're actually on a mission. I know that you spoke about this when we did our episode of Old, the New, and the Awesome over on my actual regular channel, but in a very special year, the 30th anniversary of the show, you have been rewatching Batman the Animated Series, and we are going to be celebrating this occasion on the channel here in September when we actually get to the month as to when the show first aired back in 1992. But how has that adventure been going for you, just rewatching this show and just seeing the brilliance of Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett and Paul Dini and all of these amazing minds that gave us this incredible version of Batman and his whole lore?
Well, I think from an adult perspective, I have so much more of an appreciation for it because, of course, I watched the show as it was debuting on television. And it was from a very young mind perspective. So I was immediately drawn into the darkness, but now I'm looking at it through a different lens and I'm familiar with the creators, the voice actors. So it has been such an incredible treat to see it through from the inception and just kind of slowly work my way through it, but really just enjoy each episode. As a kid, of course, I rushed home off the bus to watch an episode, and sometimes I would get in, like 5 minutes after it started, but this is like start to finish, and it's just been an incredible experience. So I cannot wait to start talking about it around the anniversary.
Yeah, and the same goes for me. I did the exact same thing. Watched it when I got home from school, watched reruns, but it wasn't until in my 20s when they finally started making the series by the season. So I was getting those DVD box sets and I was revisiting them. And that was when I was realizing that this show was more than just a cartoon about Batman, that was a little bit more mature, a little bit more darker. This was a show that was built around so much tender love and care from people who love these characters, and seeing all the names that were brought to this show to voice some of these characters. The fact that Adam West was chosen to finally come back into this world and play a character called the Grey Ghost. For me personally, knowing that Roddy McDowall is the voice of the Mad Hatter on that show just gives me so much joy. I love the fact that he's part of this world. Same with Ron Perlman as Clayface. I love the fact that Andrea Romano, God bless her, she's no longer working at this point in time. She's now enjoying a wonderful retirement, well-deserved. The fact that she was behind getting all of these big names to this show, and not just this show, all the other Bruce Timm shows that came after that, including a large portion of the beginning of this DC animated film library. So she is really one of the big names that is so praised and appreciated by people like ourselves who just love this show and love this entire animated world.
Yeah, it's magical. I mean, to be able to look back and experience it, and just, each episode too, you can kind of dig in a little bit deeper if you want to and kind of do some behind the scenes and be very knowledgeable about them as you are. And that's something that I've always envied in you, is you have this just great encyclopedia of knowledge upstairs of who does what and how you connect it. So eventually someday I'd like to get there, but right now I'm just kind of piecing it together as I go and adding the little tidbits that I, at least can relate to and understand.
Well, I don't know, and I'm not saying that you can't, but I always say to people that the reason why I have this vast head of knowledge, I say to people that God, at one point in time, looked, or at least in several times in this world, looked down upon the human race and chose a whole significant select group of people to have this vast library of pointless knowledge that would get them absolutely nowhere in their brains. But just the fact that he said, this has to be put somewhere. So apparently he chose me out of a couple of these people. Has any of this knowledge gotten me anything decent? Outside of some great friendships, this has not done anything for me monetarily or economically or anything like that. So it's just great to make friends who like this stuff, but no, this is knowledge that it's good to have, but it's not really going to get me anywhere. But anyway, before we completely go off the trails here, we are going to be taking a look at the latest DC Showcase package. And before we go into the shorts themselves, Cammie and I were having a small conversation, and she apparently has a little bone to pick with the team over at DC. And from what I can tell, it's the fact that you are noticing that the shorts that come with the main short in these DVD/Blu-ray bundles are things that have already been released before.
Mm-hmm. So I realized, based on some past conversations that you and I had, that you had said around 2019 they had stopped the shorts, and then all of a sudden they came back. And so you thought for a good time period there they might not ever surface. So of course we got excited when they started to come through again, because that's when you and I started really heavily diving into comics in our own separate worlds, and this kind of just added to that, journey. But I assumed when they came back, everything would be new and refreshing. So now what we're getting, and especially in this package that we're going to talk about today, we have Constantine, the House of Mystery. We have 3 shorts, but 2 of which we have seen before. One of them came out on Batman The Long Halloween Part 1, and the other one on Part 2. The only difference that I saw is they were just slightly a little bit longer in some areas. And I felt that in the case of one of them, the graphics were a little less grainy, but beyond that, you're not really getting a lot for your money. So, granted, when I decided to take this journey with you, I decided to invest in the Blu-ray copy, which is a little bit more expensive than the DVD, because I wanted that high quality. But when you're spending, $25, $27 for a disc, you don't want the same thing you've already purchased. So I think that my irritation is, why are we doing this? Why are we not putting a little bit more effort into giving us something we haven't seen?
Well, that's a good point, but let me debate a little bit about this with you. We also have to take a look at where we are right now in regards to how we're consuming our media. Now, you and I are a group of people that some people just look upon and say, why are they spending their money on this stuff? And most of these people are either 2 types. They're either people who just don't give a rat's ass about these things, or these are people that are streaming everything. Now, I know for a solid fact, Cammie, that you have streamed some of these animated films before. Particularly, we had a very interesting conversation about the last DC Showcase package with Batman Death in the Family. And you were absolutely shocked by the fact that on streaming, you get like less than 25% of that Choose Your Own Adventure interactive film. But the question that I have is, we talk about the fact that one of these shorts was on The Long Halloween Part 1, and another one was on The Long Halloween Part 2, and then the third one was on a different disc as well. But when you actually see these movies, let's say on a streaming service like HBO Max, do you get the special features? So do you even know that the showcase short is attached to said movie?
I don't remember, because I was so pissed off about Batman Death in the Family and how terribly cheated I was. All I did was call Amazon, and I spoke to a very pleasant representative for about 25 minutes explaining my experience. So I don't recall if you get the shorts. I almost want to say you don't when you stream on any of these services. So I'm going with no, but I will definitely double check for a future conversation that we have. But again, you know, if we started this prior to 2019, and now you're telling me that the other short that we're about to discuss has also appeared on a previous release, and you know, we are investing in these for our media library, at least you and I are, for a tangible collection. So why not give us something we haven't seen before?
Again, I agree with you 100%, but then there's also the whole thing about collecting the physical media copies. Like, I personally, yes, I know I'm buying something with things that I already have. The only thing that I know that is brand new on this is the Constantine 20-minute long showcase. And that's the same way that I felt when I originally purchased the very first showcase package, which was Superman Shazam, The Return of Black Adam. But they also said you will still get the Spectre, Jonah Hex, and Green Arrow, but you'll have a small extended version of each one. So I'm also thinking about it this way. Like, the Spectre, the original short of the Spectre came with the DVD/Blu-ray copy of Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. Now, when I pop that disc into my Blu-ray player or DVD player, am I going to watch all the special features after I watch Crisis on Two Earths? Probably not, even though I know that the Spectre short is in this package. So knowing that I have the shorts in a different spot when I just want to watch the showcase shorts on their own, it's an easier way for one to consume them in that specific way. The only short that you cannot do that with is Catwoman, which is featured on the DVD of Batman Year One. I don't know why it was never attached to a DC Showcase short package. I find that pretty weird, but all the other shorts that came with previous films are in these showcase packages. So I personally find value in it, just because of the fact that it's nice to have them all in one place rather than just going from disc to disc trying to find everything. Because I love having special features. I do love special features. Like, I could, if I ever had the time ever again, I would watch all the extended edition Lord of the Rings special features on my disc sets. It would take me probably a day and a half if I had to take meal and bathroom breaks, but lo and behold, I know for a solid fact that special features are not something that I'm going to dedicate some of my time to in this day and age. So that's why I personally am willing to shell out the extra money for the purposes of having these shorts in one place for me. That's just my attitude. If you have a different attitude, you know that I'm completely fine with that.
No, and it's not so much that I disagree with you at all. I mean, I love that idea too, because that's part of purchasing physical media, is that you have that availability to go into different chapters and just experience whatever part of that feature that you've purchased. But my argument is that we're getting the same shorts over and over. And I realize that sometimes, you know, we've expressed you get an extended version, so you do get a slight variation. And I know that's kind of the whole reasoning behind these showcase shorts, is kind of an opportunity for writers and animators to experiment with these stories and kind of tell it in a different way, whether it's, you know, a memorable experience and exciting and something we talk about, or if it's something that we're kind of like, you know, it could have been better. It's still an experience and it's still fun. And as someone who enjoys a good animation and enjoys the DC lineup, you know, I'm never going to be upset that I've purchased something. I would just like a little bit of a variety and not see the same shorts over and over again.
Yeah, and also I think the best part about having these shorts attached to the original films that they come with is to see that is there a possibility that the showcase short ends up being better than the actual film? Because I say that if the short ends up being better than the film, that says a really negative thing about you. And has that actually happened? It has happened once, and that was Death. It came with Wonder Woman Bloodlines, and Wonder Woman Bloodlines is a horrible Wonder Woman animated film. But the showcase short of Death is nothing short of brilliant.
Yes. So I'll have to agree that is absolutely one of my favorite shorts of all time. It made me fall in love with the character. It made me go out and search out the Funko Pops. So yeah, I became an instant Death fan when I saw that short. So there are some benefits to these shorts. And I kind of almost want to say, in a way, I think one of the shorts for me, it beats out this main feature, but I don't know, it's a close call, so we'll get into that.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I also find it really strange when the individual showcase shorts are actually better than the 20-minute long showcase feature. And I would definitely say that when we take a look at the last package, that is definitely true, because when you take a look at Death in the Family, what are the showcase shorts that came with that? You had Death for one, you had a Sergeant Rock, and you had the Phantom Stranger. I know that we didn't really care much for Adam Strange, but those other three ones, for me personally, Death and the Phantom Stranger are fantastically good. I love, and we both agree that the Phantom Stranger with the Scooby-Doo vibes, that's what makes it all the more special.
And what I love about these shorts too is it kind of gets you interested in their origins. You know, where did they come from? What kind of comic books are available out there that we can kind of go back and read over these characters, because you really do get interested in some of these character storylines. And for me, I love history, and I love to kind of see how characters evolve over time and how these integrate into different storylines. So the beauty of these shorts really is beyond just the imagination of these writers and animators, is that historical perspective. And for me, as I nerd out constantly again and again, I can't praise these shorts enough, because there is a lot of beauty that comes with diving into these.
I agree. I mean, again, that's why I love the fact that they're making these, because it's right out of what Showcase did when it was a comic book series. The fact that they want to give some unknown DC characters, or B-rated or C-rated characters, if you will, the spotlight, because can some of these characters even carry on their own title? Even though they try it from time to time, it doesn't always work out. So the fact that we get to be introduced to characters like Jonah Hex, or the Spectre, or Blue Beetle, or other ones like Death and Sergeant Rock. You know, it's great that we get the opportunity to see the traditions of the DC comic lore in film form. So let's start off with this main feature, which is Constantine, House of Mystery. Now, I just want to say one thing off the bat. I was a little bit surprised that Constantine was featured as the main DC showcase package, merely because of the fact that, number one, Constantine can carry a title. And number two, he already had an amazing animated film in City of Demons. And he was also featured in
one of my favorites.
And also being featured in that last New 52 DC storyline in films like Justice League Dark, or in Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. And that's why I'm mentioning these two specific films and this timeline, because Constantine, House of Mysteries is the official epilogue of that storyline. And I gotta say, when I finished watching that, besides the animation that made me want to barf, like, I didn't understand why they had to change the animation for this. I don't know if I liked it or I hated it, but if I am going to say anything about this feature, it was good that it gave this timeline of 15 DC animated films some closure. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's how I felt about this film, House of Mystery.
So I kind of grappled back and forth with this. I intended to come in, because I watched this one twice, because I wanted to complain a little bit about it. You know my love for Constantine. You know that when you introduced me to him on the Dark DC line, I fell in love with that storyline instantaneously. I could not sing its praises enough. I mean, it's still, as I just stated, one of my absolute favorites. But this one for me, I was a little bit confused going in, and that's why I watched it twice, because I'm like, it almost seems a little bit like a tease. And so you had mentioned the epilogue to the Apocalypse War, so I'm thinking I'm gonna see more of the big DC names. I'm gonna see Superman in there, you know, because you see these characters in the backdrop of that opening scene. You see the Flash run off, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what? We're in a haunted house? Like, what is going on here? But when I watched it the second time, there was some appreciation, because I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't really about the Apocalypse War. This is about the universe's revenge on Constantine, and kind of how if you toy with fate and you think that the butterfly effect is going to work, these are your consequences. So the consequences of the universe was to stick him in the House of Mystery, which is, again, from the historical perspective, kind of cool.
Yeah.
And where I do differ with you in terms of that color palette, I think that, you know, one of the things that we get with modern animation is we tend to get a little bit fancy with the animation. And so for me, it was kind of a back and forth. Like, we were giving a nod to the old House of Mystery, but we were also giving it a very modern feel in some, you know, scenes, I guess you can say, some different storylines. So there was a lot of push and pull for me. Like, do I like this then? Do I not like this? But like when he breaks out of the house, for example, you know, he breaks out the fake windows and then uses the orb to kind of just go out into this fake yard. That was the true House of Mystery for me. I'm like, okay, I'm sensing that grainy texture of that old comic book feel. But then as soon as it goes back in the house, that's when you get the more modern animation. So I'm still a little bit on the fence about it. I don't wholeheartedly love it like I do a good Dark Constantine, but it was a lot of fun. And I think that's one thing that can be said about John Constantine, is he's fun, and his humor, although dark, it works every time, you know. Each individual dream, I guess, is that what we're gonna call them? Dreams?
Scenario or something like that. Yeah, but that's also just because of the fact that Matt Ryan keeps coming back to voice Constantine. Yeah. And that's just because of the fact that you cannot have anybody at this point, until Matt Ryan dies, nobody can voice Constantine. It has to be Matt Ryan. He is Constantine for me. I've completely thrown the Keanu Reeves 2005 film under the rug, and I will never look at that film again, because Matt Ryan is John Constantine now, in live action and in animation. He's the only person to me that will ever be able to play Constantine until he dies. That's just me.
No, wholeheartedly agree. He just has that lore about him. The voicing is just perfection. He's got his comedic tone. He's got that asinine, you know, Spitfire sense about him. So yeah, I totally agree. Matt Ryan is the best choice. And I think that when you have a character like that, that's something you look forward to when you get a new story in your line. You're like, you know, the actual story itself might not be my cup of tea, but at least I get the voice of Constantine. At least I get to experience Ryan one more time, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was definite. I just basically said to myself, if anything, if there was any way that this timeline could be officially concluded and it was going to feature Constantine, the only way to do it was to just give him just put him in his own personal purgatory. That's basically what it was. And when he finally finds out who was the puppet master in this whole situation, and I will say that was my favorite part of the short, when you see the DC Cosmic and you see the Spectre talking with him, not to mention the fact that the Spectre is voiced by Lou Diamond Phillips. That was something that blew my mind. But like when he is having that conversation with the Spectre, and especially because we had seen the Spectre in a in a previous DC short, but we never saw him the way he is truly supposed to be in comics. This omnipotent being that controls destiny, controls fate, and he tells Constantine, "You broke the rules, but even though I'm punishing you because of your intentions and the reasons as to why you broke the rules, I'm going to at least let you have an exciting time in purgatory." It's weird, but it's appropriate. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I think honestly, that was my favorite part of this is the whole banter back and forth between Spectre and Constantine, because as you stated, Spectre hasn't really gotten a lot of screen time. And I think that, and you even hear this in the special features portion when the animators are talking about their creations, just kind of giving Spectre that light, you know, seeing him as the godlike creature that he was created to be. And when you have that forum for him where he gets a platform to kind of express his powers and the abilities of that revenge of sorts that he's given to Constantine for his decision, it's really just, it's a beautiful thing to watch that universe kind of just collide, and really that's what happened. So, you know, again, and not my favorite, but there are a lot of favorite parts and pieces of this that make it enjoyable and something that I will revisit time and again.
Yeah, and also you had to have watched the previous films that he was actually in, because you wouldn't know who Charlie was if you haven't seen any of them. I mean, you would recognize Etrigan, aka the Demon, you would recognize Zatanna, but you had to have seen Justice League Dark and Constantine City of Demons in order to get a little bit more of his lore in this whole scenario. I mean, now that there are 3 of these showcase packages, I'm still going to say that when it comes to the main showcase feature in these packages, that Superman, Shazam, The Return of Black Adam is still the best one. It really is. But this one, I would say it's neither good or bad, but for what it's supposed to do for this previous DC animated film timeline, it's satisfying. It gives you the ending that you appreciate, and I'm glad that it doesn't make you want to question what else is going on, like what happens next. You don't question. You're just saying, this is how it is. This is how it's going to be. I get it. Like Constantine in the House of Mystery, I'm at peace.
No, I agree with all those points, and you know, I have nothing negative to say about it other than, you know, it wasn't fully encompassing in terms of that darkness that I feel that John Constantine carries, but I don't think that was intended here, and that's okay, because I think a lot of the elements that you get with this first feature film is that intention of kind of leaving you where Apocalypse War left off, you know, okay, this is the other side of things, but then also giving you that weird side of DC, because DC can be strange at times when it takes you into that multiverse and you're just like, what's going on here? And you're trying to follow along, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know, we've seen some really bad examples of trying to make something work on an animation front, and we've seen some things that are mediocre, and I think this is something that's mediocre, but I think you can take a lot of positives out of this having come in with that history. But I completely agree with you. If you haven't explored the world of John Constantine, you might be a little bit confused as to who these extra people are, because they just seem a little bit arbitrary. But if you've seen those other films, you're like, oh, this makes total sense. And I've got to say, the kids stole the show for me. I just love that idea of him having children.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were creepy little children were even better. But every time they took center stage, they just made me laugh and enjoy them all the much more. So I think, again, you know, having seen it more than once too, allowed for me to appreciate those little things that you don't necessarily appreciate the first time around. I mean, the House of Mystery is incredible. From a horror standpoint, it's one of the better older horror comics, but it is inclined to be weird. It is inclined to not be complete. So a lot of those stories are just kind of, you know, here's something weird, take it for what it is, you know.
Yeah.
It was just that time period of those comics, you know. Nothing really had to make sense. They were just putting stuff out.
Yeah, I agree. And also when it comes to DC and even Marvel Comics as well, you know, like there are certain sections of these worlds that you like to explore. And I would definitely say that Constantine being part of the DC dark / magic universe, I've always found the DC magic universe more intriguing just because of the characters, like the various wizards and the demons and the supernatural and the paranormal. Some of these things that you get, like from everything from Swamp Thing to Constantine to Zatanna to Deadman, like you just get these interesting characters, more so than characters that you would see on the Marvel side, like Doctor Strange. Like you get more into these DC characters, and just because of the fact that they go so dark, even though some of them are extremely lighthearted, like Zatanna is one of the most lighthearted characters that DC has to offer. But when she has to go dark, she goes dark, and she goes dark hard. That's why I love DC's Magic Universe so much.
Yeah, why can't your head just be still?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I fell in the middle.
That was a great one.
Yeah, I just fell in the middle. I just like gave it a 2.5 stars out of 4, just because I don't love it or hate it. I just like, I like what I understood and like what it was supposed to do, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't really think about rating it because I think I landed on, around a 2, just because again, I was, run of the mill in the middle. So I think 2.5 is fair. But what I can appreciate about something like this that does pull out those historical elements is it reminded me of a 2-part comic book series, The History of the Universe, which kind of took us back to the beginning and then kind of, where we were at the end of that printing, which I think they were printed in like 87 or 89. I might be wrong on that. It might have been early 90s. But in any event, it showcases those characters, and I think that for me a lot of these shorts are doing that. They're pulling out the old, mixing it with the new, and giving something for every generation to love and to share, and it gives you that appreciation for what was, what is, and what is to come. So
Right.
it was fun, and not my favorite, like I said, but it was enjoyable nonetheless.
Now, when we take a look at the DC Showcase shorts that were already featured with previous films and now part of this package, I will definitely start off by saying that these 3 shorts were definitely a real step above what we have gotten in terms of creativity and homage. Not to say that they were better than Death, because nothing is, at this point in time, is ever going to top Death. But I love the fact that these 3 shorts were so uniquely animated. Like, you can pinpoint something from animation past. What I had no idea about was that some of them were actually paying tribute to actual comic book artists. I did not know that. But when I actually revisited them, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense now. So let's start with Commandy, the last boy on Earth. Now, Commandy is a character that I've known a little bit about. I actually, about 1.5 years ago, read a comic that he was in called Generation Shattered and Generations Forged, where he is chosen to go throughout DC's time and pull certain characters from certain time periods to save the universe. So he goes into the far future, he gets Superboy. He then goes back into 1927 and he picks up DC Detective Comics 27 Batman. It's a very fun story, but I loved the animation of this short, even though I learned that it's supposed to be paying tribute to Jack Kirby. To me, it reminded me of something like Thundar the Barbarian. It was just like an old 1970s Hanna-Barbera cartoon. It was just so cool to look at.
Yeah, this definitely had very 70s vibes. I was just very drawn to that old gritty style animation, and it kept it throughout. It wasn't until they, also in the special features area, when they had put up Jack Kirby and kind of showed that homage to him, that I was like, wow, they really did go all out in terms of making sure the backdrops of each of these different layers of this short were very Kirby-esque, and there was a lot of detail. So hats off and kudos to the colorists and to the animators of this particular film, because I really feel like they did pull out the Kirby stops. I think that, you know, if you are definitely a Jack Kirby fan, you can certainly appreciate what they did with this film. But it was a fun film. I mean, I wasn't bored with it. The characters were all likable. It
Very
was a very
exciting.
fast-paced story, and you were drawn in, you know, as they were going on this adventure, or this quest, if you will. You did kind of get those old adventure vibes, you know, and I felt like you were watching a fun Saturday morning cartoon.
That's exactly what I was about to say. And also, Cameron Monaghan, who has given himself to voicing characters in DC many times before, even actually in the series Gotham, where he played the young Jerome who was quote unquote the Joker, you know, and I know him from Shameless, of course. He's a great actor, but I love the fact that he voiced Commandy. And speaking of the Jack Kirby tribute, the one thing that I don't know if you are aware of, but I'll give you a little bit of an education right now. Do you know what is meant by the Kirby crackle?
I've heard the term, but no, I don't know the definition.
So the Kirby crackle is a patented drawing style that Jack Kirby did throughout his entire time, but until the day he died, where he has a character that's emitting energy, has like this little force field around them with like black and white dots and like a couple of sparkles and yellow and thick black lines all around it. That's what's known as the Kirby crackle. So there is a moment in the short where someone lets off an energy beam and starts it off with a Kirby crackle. And I was like, oh, wow, there's a Kirby crackle there. I never would have known that in a million years. But yeah, so that was really, really cool. Yeah, but you're right. It's a very engaging story. You are definitely, there's never any dull moments. There's tons of action. The one drawback that I have about that whole short was I predicted it. I knew how it was going to end, and I knew the ultimate / mighty one. I knew it was Superman. I knew it.
Unlike you, I did not see it coming. I think more than anything, I was kind of just wrapped up in all of these various characters and how there was so many stories within stories, because it seemed like each character, although they were on the same journey, had, or maybe the same quest is the better way to put it,
Or
were
tests.
all on individual journeys. Yeah, test, because this was definitely a test. So I was very much locked into each of their stories and just the character development and kind of seeing how they interlocked with each other, how they communicated with each other, and just the backstory on Commandy himself, you know, where his name came from, you know, how he became the last man on Earth. So yeah, that one kind of blindsided me, and I was like, oh, that was interesting, you know. So yeah, I did not predict it at all.
Yeah, I mean,
it just went by the wayside.
And I know there's a lot of people that would probably say that so much of the short was ripped off from Planet of the Apes, especially when you see the Statue of Liberty in the background at some point in time. But you know something? That is something that they did in the 1960s and 70s when we were finally getting things like the Twilight Zone and Star Trek and Planet of the Apes. We're getting all of these cult science fiction and fantasy worlds opening up at a time where people were so interested in these things. So of course the comic companies were capitalizing on the silver age of comic books, adding in cosmic and aliens and stuff like that. You know, and science. So it's no surprise that some of these things are quote unquote borrowed for the purposes of creating a completely different story. It's not a surprise to me.
Yeah, it's funny that you said the Planet of the Apes, because it was definitely in my notes and I just overlooked it. But yeah, I got immediate Planet of the Apes vibes as soon as those, you know, kind of well, they were monkey-like characters, you know, and they started talking, and then their stronghold and how they kind of wanted to just dominate the whole storyline. So I think that in an instance like that, though, even though you get those feelings, you're absolutely right. It was of that time. So I don't look at it as stealing. I look at it as that's what everybody was interested in that time period. So of course you're going to have those, little pieces that are taken and kind of interlaced to make other new things interesting and make people like, hey, if you like this, have you tried this on for size? So, if it's an absolute carbon copy replica, then I'll call it a knockoff. But when you just have kind of a nod or some similarities, I don't see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun one. I would give it a 3.5 stars out of 4 just because of the fact that I predicted the ending. That's the only reason why it doesn't get the perfect 4 from me. But it's very much enjoyable. And again, the nostalgia feels of the classic cartoon and the Jack Kirby tributes, which gave it to me when I found out about that, gave me a whole new outlook on this short itself. It's very much enjoyable regardless.
Yeah, I think I land somewhere in the same 3.5. Just because I like hybrid characters, it's not something I ever thought I'd hear myself say. Maybe it's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle lover in me. There's plenty of hybrid characters within that series, but I've just come to appreciate those different storylines where you have a mixed creature that is on some kind of quest or journey and constantly coming up against these, whether it be personal tests or if they're being tested by the outside world or they're fighting for something. So yeah, it was very entertaining. I can't say that enough. If anything else you walk away from, you will be entertained with Commandy.
And then you get the Losers. Now, the Losers is a very interesting piece of DC because I don't know, because I know I haven't yet, but I still remember that early 2000s movie, The Losers, which is actually based on the DC comic. It's a completely different time. It's a completely different cast. It's a completely different story. But the Losers have been in DC Comics for many, many years. I mean, they were pretty much there, I think, during the golden age of comics, going into the silver age. It's basically an army troop that tackles the supernatural, very similar to Sergeant Rock to a certain degree. I mean, I have no idea if Sergeant Rock and the Losers ever had a crossover comic. I'm not sure. But the Losers, I will say, is probably the weakest of the bunch. I was actually surprised when I was watching it and watching the credits roll. I had no idea that a current comic book writer, Tim Sheridan, actually wrote that episode. I did not know that. So I thought that was pretty cool. But at the same time, The Losers is a very action-packed story. It's very bare bones. It's very easy to follow. It's basically the Losers uncovering Dinosaur Island, which is a very well-known part of DC lore, and they get stabbed in the back by one of their own. And again, not to say that I didn't see it coming, I also found that ending very predictable. It's for some strange reason, when I was watching that and I saw all the members of the Losers showing up, I literally had that famous song from Sesame Street in my head. One of these things is not like the other. And I said to myself, why do I have a feeling that that woman is trouble? Why do I have a feeling? And lo and behold, I was right.
Well, that's when I had my serious case of deja vu. I'm like, I've seen this before, have I not? So that's when I realized that we were seeing some of the same shorts, because obviously that was one that was featured in The Long Halloween. But I love war, and
Yes.
I love reading about it in comic form, especially in the World War II era, because you can interlock so many characters that make sense in that. I mean, of course, we see like Captain America quite a bit in a World War II setting. We see Wonder Woman, but to see a very vintage setting like The Losers, and again, getting this from the special features, one of the things that was said is that you kind of get a mix of soldiers in this short. They're not all the same. They're all very different. And so for that element, I definitely appreciate it. And I'm a huge dinosaur buff, so anytime you mix war and dinosaurs, count me in. So as predictable as this one was for me, and being that I had seen it before, I found myself paying attention, a little bit more this time around, just to make sure I hadn't missed something, because I was very much engaged in the main feature of when that was first featured. So here it was all about focusing on the details. And so although I didn't find it, again, predictable like you did, having seen it, I do remember her being kind of the bad guy, so to speak. But I do like the storyline too, because
Yeah, it's a good story.
the whole idea of yeah, just of where it was headed, it's very true to that time period, and then again, like I said, when you mix humans and dinosaurs, what can go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I also appreciate the fact that if you're going to get anybody to play a Asian character like Fan, I mean, you choose nobody but Ming-Na Wen. I mean, like, she's always dynamite. And I didn't even realize, because she has been featured in so many comic book related things and science fiction things, I had no idea how big of a nerd that woman is. She loves her comic books. She loves her Star Wars. The fact that she is in a Star Wars show, the fact that she has voiced so many comic book characters, the fact that she was a character on Marvel's Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., she loves this crap. So the fact that she gets every opportunity to do these types of things, and I know that she brings her game 100%. And I wanted to capitalize on something that you said earlier, or shall I use your own personal words, piggyback on what you said. You're absolutely right. One of the best war motifs, especially, you've seen it in so many films and books and TV shows, like you see it in Platoon, you see it in Apocalypse Now, you see it in Band of Brothers, you see that every single one of these soldiers in this troop has a unique feature that sets them apart from the other, so you really get the opportunity to connect with at least one of them. Right now, I am currently watching Star Wars, the animated show, The Bad Batch, and every single one of these defective clone troopers is a completely different character. Like, they're not uniform, and I love that. You can pick out the crazy strong one and you could bond with that character, the leader, or you could love the one that's into tech. It's very similar to the Ninja Turtles. You can pick a Ninja Turtle that you're going to relate to. I love that. But yeah, so every single one of those characters, you can definitely find a connection because each and every one of them is unique. And you're right. And also just bringing Dinosaur Island into it. I mean, Dinosaur Island is a part of DC lore I don't know too much about, but I know that it's a very big piece. Of course, Marvel ripped that idea off with the Savage Land, but it's interesting. It's a very interesting story. I mean, it makes me actually want to see that early 2000 film just to see exactly how much of the Losers is actually taken from the comic to the screen. I mean, and also I'll see it for the cast because it's got Zoe Saldana, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Chris Evans, Idris Elba, so like, maybe I'll finally watch that. I don't know. But this one was action-packed. It was quick. It was fun. Again, not great, not terrible. It was like a 2.5-star thing for me, pretty much.
It sounds like we're both going to have to watch it and maybe talk about it on the New, the Old, the Awesome.
Maybe. I'll see. But now I want to talk about my favorite short in this package, and that's Blue Beetle. Now, Blue Beetle, there's a big following for Blue Beetle in comic books. People love Blue Beetle, whether it's the Ted Kord version, which we got in this, which I've really appreciated, or even the current one, Jaime Reyes. People love Jaime Reyes. I love Jaime Reyes as Blue Beetle, but Blue Beetle is a very interesting character in DC because imagine if Batman was more of a people person. That's Blue Beetle.
Yeah, you definitely get instant detective vibes off of Ted Kord. You fall in love with his sense of humor. But right off the cuff, I mean, this screams 1960s, from the
Yes.
introduction theme music to the animation, the grittiness of the screen. I just instantly fell in love with this film. I could not get enough of it. I honestly would love to see this in an animated series. I would just eat this up.
Yeah, this looked like the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon. They said that this was also a tribute to Steve Ditko, who is the original artist of the Spider-Man comics back in the 1960s. It was also cool to see some other DC heroes featured in this, like Captain Atom and Lady Shiva and The Question. I personally love The Question. I don't know if you're familiar with The Question.
Well, just like Death, I'm going to go on a Question vibe now, and I'm going to look him up because he was absolutely the showstopper for me. I just loved that whole face, the lack thereof. I loved his humor. I loved how integrated he was in terms of matching wit for wit with the Blue Beetle. So yes, I am all about knowing more about The Question. Give me all The Question.
I'll tell you exactly where to go. As you continue your Bruce Timm adventure, after you watch Superman the Animated Series, after you watch Batman Beyond, watch Justice League, and when you get to Justice League Unlimited, that is where you're going to get all The Question you want, because The Question is a driving force of that first JLU season, and that is where I first discovered The Question. That is where I became a huge fan of The Question, because what I just mentioned, it's so funny that I mentioned that Blue Beetle is Batman if you were more of a people person. The Question is if Batman was an insane conspiracy theorist. That's The Question.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's a great description of both characters. I can't sing enough praises about their chemistry. Their chemistry on screen together just is magical. And this whole, I mean, it's beyond entertaining. You're like on the edge of your seat, like, give me more. It was humorous. It just gave me very classic cartoon vibes.
No, there was one word, the one word that sells this short to me: the camp. The camp sells it in every way possible. It is so over the top silly, but you look at this and say, this is exactly what I would get from a 1960s comic book superhero cartoon. This is exactly what I would get from a Super Friends episode. This is everything you expect. And it was just great to see that amazing tribute. It really, really was. And it made me laugh. There are very few of the DC shorts that actually make me laugh. This one just made me laugh.
Well, as a child of the 80s, I mean, when I'm thinking back to all the cartoons that I really loved and I could watch endlessly for hours, you know, you think of the Flintstones, you think of the Jetsons, you think of all these very campy ones, but in the mix of that, you were also getting, you know, Huckleberry Hound and, you know, all these nods to the 60s. So to have that mix and then throw this in, it's just, it gives you all the feels of yesteryear, both things of your generation and the ones that came before you. And I just think the nod to that era in animation was so spot on. I really, really hope that animators do choose to make this into a feature, because I would eat that series up in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing about Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle is a character that is so loved but doesn't really seem to get his own series. Also, another thing that's really great about this story was the meta moments. Like, I love the scene where the Question kept telling him, I know your identity, and then he finally realizes, oh crap, I actually gave him my identity. But I also love, my favorite part, the one that, like, that's maybe a plot, was when Lady Shiva and Captain Atom come and say, but you two are beloved Charleston Comics characters. You can't be mean, you know? And he actually holds up, because that's the funny thing. These characters came from an old comic book company called Charlton, which was absorbed by DC. That's where Blue Beetle came from. So I love the fact that he actually holds up an old comic book. And I'm like, oh my God, you literally went there. That was brilliant. That was so brilliant.
And the timing is impeccable in this short. I mean, like, you know, that's a perfect example of it, because again, it goes alongside that camp and you just can't help but smile and applaud and be joyful and joyous in this whole experience. So yeah, I highly applaud this. This was hands down 4 stars for me. It was the best of all of
Yeah.
them, and I just hope that we see more of Blue Beetle in the future.
Yeah, it's a 4-star one for me too. And I will just say that yeah, Ted Kord is a great character. And one of the people that really used him in his recent stories was Jeff Johns. He really did some great work with him. But in one of the other things that a lot of people know about Blue Beetle is in the late 80s into the early 90s, the Justice League was called the Justice League International. It was basically some unknown characters, and one of them was Blue Beetle, and another character that was part of that Justice League group was a character named Booster Gold. Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, through that time frame, developed this buddy routine that the fans just ate up. And people were always saying, like, give me a comic where Blue Beetle and Booster Gold just go on adventures together. I don't know if you even remember this, but there was a Funko Pop 2-pack of Blue Beetle and Booster Gold that was sold, because the two of those characters go hand in hand for the last 30 years. And last year, DC Comics made an 8-part miniseries called Blue and Gold, written by Dan Jurgens. It was Blue Beetle and Booster Gold on an adventure. I bought all 8 issues. It was so much fun. It was exactly what I wanted. And that's what I would say. Give me a Blue and Gold movie, an animated movie of Ted Kord and Booster Gold going on an adventure together. That would sell it for me. It's brilliant.
Yeah, see, this is why this explosion happened, because every time you and I have a discussion, I'm making notes and I've got to go add comic books and Funko Pops to my collection, because now I know about those storylines.
Yeah, I never got the Booster Gold and Blue Beetle Funko Pop, but that's another thing, because Booster Gold did get featured on Justice League Unlimited, but we never did see Blue Beetle, and I was a little upset about that, because it would have been really cool to see the two of them go hand in hand. But yeah, Blue and Gold was a great comic book. It was 8 issues. It was so much fun, and this cartoon was just so much fun, and I agree with you. Give me more. Give me more of that. And, you know, at the end of the day, when you take a look at this package as a whole, it makes you want to get more of these DC Showcase shorts. It's just because, you know, there are so many other characters, and you want to see some of these characters. Like, I would love to see them do a short on Booster Gold. Heck, if they wanted to do Booster Gold and Blue Beetle in that animation style, I'll eat that up with a spoon. I would. But, you know, there are characters like Swamp Thing and Dr. Fate and a whole bunch of other characters that we still have yet to be introduced to in the DC world, or getting an opportunity to see them get a chance to shine in the spotlight. So I'm hoping that we'll get some of those in future DC Showcase projects. I mean, I don't know if they're going to continue them, but, you know, every single time I pick up a new DC animated film and I see a DC Showcase short attached to it, I get very excited, because I'm just curious about, where are we going in DC? Which character are we going to look at today, you know?
And I do think that is honestly the joy. It was even brought up in this particular film in the special features of just, you know, how often we see those big mainstream DC characters, but it's not often that these smaller characters or characters of yesteryear get that spotlight and get the opportunity to kind of shine again. And then the way these shorts are created, it's a complete different Imagineer behind the drawing table on these, bringing them to life, paying homage to yesterday, but giving us a whole new story. So yeah, I live for these shorts. I think they're the best thing about these DC animated, you know, showcase feature films. And I implore them to just continue on, because it really does offer something that you look forward to going out and purchasing.
Yeah, and in conclusion, before we officially close this out, it goes back to a conversation that you and I had a couple of times on some of these previous shows that we've done. You know, when you have some great comic minds going back into the DC world and trying to bring back the JSA, you know, when you find the Justice Society out there, that's what gets me all the more excited because I love those characters. And that's why I'm sort of excited for the new Black Adam movie starring Dwayne Johnson, because we're going to get some of those JSA characters that we have never even seen in so many shapes or forms outside of the comic books. The fact that we're going to see Hawkman, the fact that we're going to see Dr. Fate, the fact that we're going to see Atom Smasher, characters that you don't know too much about and you want to learn so much more about. I just hope that the JSA will return in the animated films, will return in the comic books, because you know, I was just talking with Andy the other day. He started reading Jeff Johns' JSA run, and he is madly in love with that series already because he loves the fact that these are the golden age of superheroes brought back in modern times, and yet Jeff Johns wants to make sure that he still captures that golden age feel with these characters, because that's what they are, you know, and that's why I'd want to see more of that. That's why you love Injustice Zero, because you see the Justice Society in that series.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably one of the best parts of that, is that how eloquently it just ties it into the story, but it does it in such a way where those characters still stand on their own 2 feet. They are who they are. They're not trying to overshadow the new, line of DC characters, but you realize that we couldn't have got where we are today without them. And to forget about them, to not write about them, to not bring their stories back out of the vault is just such a disservice to comic enthusiasts everywhere. So I live for these shorts because you do get that opportunity to see these characters that you don't see very often, that you don't talk about very often, and it gives them life again, and it gets you excited. And two, it kind of breaks up the monotony. Think about how many times you're just like, oh, another Batman story, oh, another Superman story.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, I get excited about it,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's just nice to have new characters to get excited about.
Exactly, or even old characters you haven't seen in a while to get excited about. Yeah, so that's gonna wrap up another DC animated live show, everybody. This was so much fun. Not sure exactly how we're gonna continue this year because we're only getting apparently one film from the brand new DC Rebirth timeline this year. So I don't know if I want to wait for more to show up in 2023 or if I just want to rope it into the DC animated movies that we're getting, because outside of that one and this DC Showcase Shorts package, we are getting a total of 3 DC animated films this year outside of that timeline. 2 of them have already dropped. And I'm looking forward to having the discussion with you regarding Catwoman Hunted and DC Superhero Girls versus Teen Titans Go. We'll see, but we'll just have to wait till the rest of the films for 2022 come out. But in the meantime, everybody, I'm really hoping that you enjoyed. Please leave a like and a comment. We'd love to talk to you. And please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you're up to date with our latest content, which I promise everybody is coming before this year comes to an end. There will be a whole bunch of videos for you all to enjoy. But in the meantime, everybody, we will see you in the next one.